um, there's a conscious reason for us connecting, right? Just like you said, the trail led you to catch up with me, and then, but I think there's always purpose beyond. There's purpose to what you're doing
More
beyond
cunning
what
than they
you
may appear.
know yet. There's purpose to what I'm doing beyond what I know, and so it's nice to follow those non-coincidences.
Um, it's always going to be kind of interesting to see how different connections play off and what results of that. Because like when I saw you working with Metallica in the documentary, it was interesting because they seem to be going through quite a very rough time in their career when those cameras started rolling for it. But as James put it, in that documentary at some point, you were basically like an angel to him. So it sounded like there was a lot of like respect and love for you for showing up in their lives when you did. So, maybe this can just turn into a simple conversation of like what it was like for you, helping out all these different, musicians, athletes, even corporate officers, or it could end up becoming something kind of like I don't even know how to really describe it, because when we tried to do this before, you said you said you had to put it off for a brief time because I think it was one of your daughters was going through surgery.
Yeah,
In the last
our
minute.
daughter. Yeah.
And my first thought was like, my first thought wasn't like, oh man, this is going to get in the way of me being able to do something. My first thought was like, I hope she's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we could talk about that. We could talk about anything, whatever comes. I like this, and I'm so glad so I can see you. It's like that extra dimension. It gives us a chance to interact, like I said, in a different way. So just anything that comes up in Andrew's mind, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, anything that you want that feels intuitive. I love intuition. I love the spontaneity of something. So wherever you want to start, any place.
Well, I've already hit the live button, so
Okay, we're
we're
good.
going.
Yeah.
So, I guess one thing I want to start with is to establish a little bit of background. So I guess the first question for you would be, where did you come from? What kind of like education did you get to where you are now?
I like the question of where did you come from better than what kind of education do you have. Welcome, everybody, and from this Phile Towle with Andrew. Andrew, thank you very much for having me on board. Looking forward to this. Andrew, as you heard, the question of where did I come from? Obviously, I was born, right, and that was a rather ordinary experience from what I understand from my parents. Grew up in South Pasadena, California, and lived with my family intact, mother and father. Mother was a former social worker who gave up her social work career to be a wife and mother, as women did in those days. Very strong influence on myself and my younger brother, who's he's a retired Unitarian minister. Very, very talented, very bright, very significant figure in the Unitarian Church, and a great influence in my life. Father was an insurance man, and on the surface, a businessman, as all fathers are in some way or another, whether they are fathers we love or not, or enjoy or not, was an influence. He was a kind of insurance man that would deliver the policies to his customers live and in person. Had a personal relationship with his business people and his clients, and taught me how. Obviously, my mother's influence of social work, helping people, and my father was a hands-on, like I said, a hands-on businessman, which showed me the respect he had for people. And so I grew up early on in a family where of four, where we took in people, family, relatives, kids who were struggling in families. My father's secretary's son, who needed some attention. So we became kind of a small nursery, kind of in a way, with other extended kids, extended family with kids in the bedroom upstairs, which was like five or six kids at once then. And um, so I learned very early to the importance. I was kind of my mother's little helper, not Rolling Stones, mother's little helper kind of thing.
Right.
But I was kind of a kid who learned that you take care of other people, you put other people first, and so that I guess probably, as I think about it, was the, the forward to a life that's been ultimately devoted to doing psychotherapy, and then ultimately what I call performance coaching. And the part that's probably more interesting to people, after I did about 30 years of psychotherapy and then got kind of burned out with that. But as I look back on it, it was less burnout and more a way for me to transition into helping people um, who wanted to become the best of who they are, as opposed to helping rescue people from a place of pain and suffering. Psychotherapy is, to me, kind of brings people back to even, and performance coaching is what I call it, is helps people go from even to breaking even, to using a crisis not just to break even, but as a way to break out to become better human beings and better in whatever else they're doing. That was long-winded. What do you have for me? Any
Well,
reaction?
it sounds like a lot of where you're at now was very much influenced by your upbringing.
Yes.
So how much of that do you find yourself like? Do you ever think back on it at all nowadays?
I'm doing it right now. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and it obviously piques your attention because that's what you picked out of that. Can you relate to that yourself? I mean, can you see the pathway that's taken from childhood for you to the place you are now?
Sort of, because part of it is where I'm at now. I'm using this as a bit of a platform to help people who want to get into
Yes.
to entertainment. As I stated before, I actually hit the live button, honestly. Um, but I only made the decision to start doing voice acting about August, September-ish, I think, last year, and that was just kind of after one of my friends in this podcast group that I'm with. Um, he decided to just approach me out of the blue and say, "Hey, I'm working with somebody on this fan voicing project that for something that's already out because we just want to do it for fun. Do you want to try out for this role?" I'm like, "Sure." I sent it in and didn't hear back from it because the guy completely fell off the face of the earth. Um, but that kind of reminded me of when I tried to do so 5, 7 years ago, and that project did start. It just, kind of also disappeared. But it reminded me of how fun it was to, get to the microphone, record something, and just do something for a bit of fun. And now I'm actually, trying to pursue it for, the bigger ventures because, once that independent project came out, it's under the name Has Been Hotel, which of all things, it's based in the realm of hell. But the daughter of Lucifer is starting a hotel to help sinners rehabilitate.
Wow, I love that. I
Yeah,
mean, that reminds me of Hotel California, right?
a little bit, yeah. It's it exploded for various reasons, and I'm still trying to put together some help to get that set up because it's intended to be a video going into a little bit of analysis. Why did this explode so much? Um, but that's inspired a lot of people to start getting into things like animation, voice acting. It's become a huge focus for a lot of artists online. Um, but it definitely helped me find out why I want to go for it is because when the voice actors for that project started doing this podcast with one of the animators, um, I started seeing the kind of like dynamic and fun that they were having between each other, and I'm just like, that feels a lot like the type of friendships I've had, outside of the internet, just hanging out with people you enjoy being with,
There you go.
having some fun, and just getting into silly situations for ridiculous laughs. Uh, I don't know if I'll ever find that in any particular project that I'm a part of, but I'm sure making the connections with other voice actors, or just other people in whatever these projects are, I feel like there could be a lot of fun to be had, depending on who I end up becoming close with in the process. But as it is, I've at least found that group at the start, with this other podcast group that I'm with, and that's we're finally coming back actually later today. Um, so I'm kind of looking forward. I'm kind of very much looking forward to that. But part of why I wanted to get into, or what I wanted to start this little series of mine is, in growing up, I've made a lot of mistakes myself. Um, and nowadays I have that mindset of, stop being so ashamed of your mistakes, learn from them, uh, because we learn more from our mistakes than we do from things that we do right.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I'm hoping is that, the various people that I bring into this little show of mine is they can share some of their experiences that other people can learn from, so that hopefully they don't make the same mistakes, or if they do, they can learn from it much easier, uh, when they make the mistakes themselves, rather than having to navigate it blind.
Wow. And I'm really, I hope that your listeners are paying attention to that. And it's a great place to launch into some discussion, further discussion, if you want. I mean, I'm very impressed with the fact that you understand. Well, I like the fact that you like to hang with the people that are important to you. We all, I think, as social human beings, that's what we want to do. We find common ground. We hang with people that are similar to us, and or interesting or stimulating to us. And you found some places where you can hang and find meaning with yourself, for yourself and for other people, and that's really cool. And then I like the fact that you are aware. What I think most of us are aware of is that our mistakes can be our greatest growth opportunities, is what you're saying, in my words, and how oftentimes beating ourselves up as an alternative, or like dwelling on the mistakes, takes energy away from the creative part of a mistake and the opportunity to convert the mistake into something that makes us a better human being than we were before the mistake. I mean, that's my objective.
Right.
And when I was doing psychotherapy, again, for me, it was like, people would come in with a crisis or a problem, and the objective at that point was to try to help them understand what happened and also convert it. But it was more about getting back to a place of even, where they can feel okay about themselves now. And the reason why I went into what I call performance coaching, was because I had an epiphany when I was running one day. And that epiphany was, I was asking the universe, like, so what's the difference between psychotherapy, which is what I had been doing, and what I wanted to do with performance coaching? And I actually heard a voice, and the voice said, you used to work with people's nightmares. Now you're working with their dreams. And I thought that was really profound. And what it means to me in the context of what you and I are talking about right now is, when you relieve a nightmare, or a mistake, you feel better having put the mistake behind you. But in a sense, as I'm hearing myself talk about right now, putting a mistake in front of you, or in front of us, in other words, facing that mistake, carrying it forward with us, converting it into something special, is like the old saying of turning lemons into lemonade, right? So the hard parts of our lives can be transformative moments if we don't try to relieve them. I mean, our society, right? If I have a headache, I take I don't get headaches very much, but if I have something that's off, I may take a pill for it.
Right.
And I try not to take pills for things because the lesson is relieved. The opportunity to understand where that headache came from, or that what happened in this crisis, what's my part in it, what could I do differently going forward, that gets erased with either a pill or blaming somebody else. If I get pissed, if you and I have a conflict and I blame you for it, I look to you for you to change, as opposed to for me to look at, okay, what was my part? Did I say something to Andrew, or did I do something to Andrew, or with Andrew, that is my piece of it? If Andrew looks at his piece of it, Phil looks at his piece of it, then we're going to grow our relationship. We're going to get stronger. I'm going to grow myself and be stronger. You're going to grow yourself. You're going to be better. And now I'm fired up. Yeah, so thank you for see, just triggering that, activating that from what you're describing in your life makes a great deal of difference. And I'm so happy for your audience and for you that you are doing these podcasts because you want to help humanity.
Right.
You want to help people evolve.
I always want to help people do better, and it's like you brought up an interesting point, is that whenever I find myself talking with people about a particular conflict that comes up, I'm usually trying. I find myself trying to wonder, especially in hindsight, if we both looked at our part and in the conflict, in that okay, yeah, I said something that I really should not have, but was there something that they also could have done to maybe not just avoid the problem, but acknowledge what their part in it was, how they can do better from it as well. Because not every conflict is one-sided. There's always something for us to learn especially if we both did something that didn't really help it.
Yeah, I like that.
I've been there before multiple times, and I've only in the last few years been getting better at it, because I'm just like, I'm tired of making the same mistakes. I'm tired of, constantly letting things get worse. And it's gotten to the point where, I've had some of these conflicts with some close friends of mine that I go and play Dungeons and Dragons with. Some things came up in the group, some personal issues, not so much with the game.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what they got me to start doing is just go and talk with them in person, not over the internet, face the problem itself, and
Nice.
talk it out. I've showed up to some of these issues, scared out of my mind, but nowadays we're still getting along with it. We're still getting along. We're still playing our games. The issues are acknowledged, and they've been improved on, and we have that frame of reference to know where we can do better from. And I don't know how many other friend groups are out there that actually acknowledge the same thing and work off the same mindset. Because I've seen conflicts that don't turn out too well, and it's like part of it was when I went back to watch Some Kind of Monster again, sometime before this interview. In that, I think it was shortly before the camera started rolling. Jason had just left the band, because he, in short, he was just tired of it. He was tired of everything that was going on, and I guess that opened up a whole can of worms with the rest of the group.
Yes.
Because there was a lot. They were some of those guys were part of the biggest name in heavy metal for, at that point, I think it was 3 decades by the time the movie came out.
Yeah.
I wonder how it would have turned out if they weren't willing to just straight up face the consequences. And from what I understand, it wasn't the band itself that asked for you to be there. It was their management company. But it kind of sounds like I go back to one of your first lines in that film is, challenging them to ask themselves, am I comfortable with the cameras rolling, or something to that effect, to see what's going on with this, what's going on with us right now.
Well, you said a lot there, okay,
Yeah.
and it reminds me. I want to reinforce that again. That conflict. Well, let me say it this way. I grew up in my family never watching a conflict be resolved. I would venture to say that the same. Um, let me make sure I'm clear about that. Meaning, my father and mother would, if they had fights, they would have fights off camera, so to speak. It would not be around. So, because I think in that day it was more like you don't want the kids to experience the tension of a conflict. I knew that they had problems like everybody else did, but I never got to see them resolve a conflict, is what I mean to say. It's hard to see. I don't mean that they didn't resolve it, but where's our role models for conflict resolution? I bet that most of us listening to the show uh, don't have role models for conflict resolution. And yet, you and I are talking about something, bravely talking about how important it is to use conflict as a growth opportunity, which I believe its purpose is. I believe that conflict is very, very misunderstood. Conflict is frightening to us because it threatens the foundation of a relationship. The payoff for a conflict could be that we'll never speak to each other again. And that's one of the ways that things do. That's one of the outcomes, right? So, but it's occurred to me over a period of time that the purpose of conflict, maybe we could call it the divine purpose or the spiritual purpose of conflict, is to bring people closer together, is to break the what's happening now. It's to break up the stuckness of what's happening now and move the relationship beyond where it is. And the only way you can do that is like you've done so well, by going and talking to your cohorts, talking to saying, I'm going to face it. That's gutsy, man. That's ballsy. I really like that. You go talk to somebody face to face and say, hey, let's resolve this. Look at our society, Andrew. Come on, dude. I mean, our society, we're in deep trouble in the sense that we're living examples in America of how divided we are and how we are not able to resolve the conflicts, which have to ultimately, for success, be win-wins, if you will. That seems really far removed from possibility right now. But I really appreciate how you and your friends have, strive to resolve something. And I encourage anybody that's out there to, number one, we're not equipped in terms of role models. We don't see resolution happening live. We didn't see it as kids, probably. So we go into it scared, and we wind up in a place of more comfortably blaming the other person, or trying to prove our point, or trying to make the other person change. I don't do a perfect job of that. I just learned the hard way over a period of time. And I believe very strongly that this is as a theme for what you and I are talking about right now, is golden, great opportunity. With regard to Metallica, which I know I'm probably interested in, Jason became, in that first session, the first time I had with him, which was off camera, right?
Right.
I worked with them for 3 months or so before the cameras started rolling. Jason was the catalyst for the band having to look at itself, right? And they did a good job. I mean, James started to look at himself, and that's one of the reasons why he went into rehab. We all started to look at ourselves and say, well, so what, it's not just Jason. It would have been easy to just extrude Jason from the system and think everything was fine. And that's what we do very often nowadays when we're like, let's get a divorce. Okay, fuck you. And then there's the emphasis is on fighting. If we get an attorney to fight against each other, it's not about, you can only love your way out of a conflict, if you will. You can only you can't resolve. When I was doing psychotherapy, I found it was extremely hard to help people get a constructive divorce if they wanted to do that, because what they would do is justify the ending of the relationship by being pissed off at the other person, right? So I began at that particular point in time, which probably led, as I think about it now, me into doing more performance coaching or proactive stuff, working with people to try to convert stuff into greatness, if you will. It was very helpful to me to be able to express it, and thank you for that question. But the point I'm getting to is we cannot, you have to move forward from a place of love and respect. And that's hard to achieve if I'm trying to expect you to be the way I want you to be as my solution for that which you stimulate that I need to grow.
Right. Um, it, there was definitely a lot that I picked up from, and when I got to hindsight, um, when I started getting through these conflict resolutions of my own with this group of mine, hindsight helped me to like kind of compare what Metallica was going through in the film, and
Mm-hmm.
some of it felt very similar. Was um, you know, what's the possibility that I may never be dealing with these people again? And I actually have gotten to that point where I said I'm done talking with these people, and after some time, uh, one of us reached out to the other and said, "All right, let's try and talk about this because we decided that feeling was worse, leaving things off on a bad note and not dealing with it at all, as opposed to just talking it out and seeing how it would best end for all of us. Because in the end, just saying, I'm done talking with you, we're not learning anything from that. Uh,
Brilliant. Yeah.
and
Nice.
when I saw what happened with Metallica, yeah, they didn't get Jason back, and that's understandable. He decided he was, I guess, more comfortable doing his own thing, whereas Metallica decided to accept what had happened and move forward from there. And they, reached out and got Robert Trujillo, who's still on with the band to this day. And I have seen them a few years after that film came out because I was still in high school when I saw them live in 2008. Uh, fun show. Um, and ironically, I was not actually aware of the film until a few years later after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, and so I started seeing like there's always a lot more going on behind the scenes for some of these people you always look up to, and it may
Brilliant
not
point.
just be some celebrity you look at. Like a lot of people are huge fans of Rihanna or Beyonce. They could be huge fans of I don't know, Dead Mouse or uh, wow, her name is escaping me already. Um,
Let it go.
yeah, the name will come to me, I'm sure. But they're role models for a lot of people, and people may not always know there's still those very human things that come up behind the scenes with them. They're stressed out about meeting this deadline to do something, while it's conflicting with their desire to meet with a friend that they haven't seen in a long time. The same thing can happen with, any other, role model figure in their lives. It could be their parents, who are divorced and they don't see one or the other very often. It could be, an uncle or a grandparent that they haven't seen in a long time. It could be a very close friend that they used to hang out with a lot before they moved out of town. A lot of this can happen, and it's very easy to forget that human side can still apply, to these, people who are of much higher profile. Um, so it starts to get to the point of, you know, where do we start to draw the line of what we're willing to learn from those role models? Um, because you brought it up before. You haven't. I don't know how often it was that you haven't seen your parents resolve their conflicts without directly involving you guys in it. Uh, but do you think there could have been more learned from it if you were to stumble upon them, going through that process of resolving the conflict?
Yes, of course, my parents are deceased. And I'm thinking right now, as you're talking, a lot of nice things you're saying and stimulating. Let me say this first. I hope you all out there that are listening to Andrew are getting to know him and and you're taking the time to listen to him, to understand him. So when you're listening to a podcast, you get more connected with Andrew, and you understand why he's asking a question, or you understand more about him because you're getting inside of who he is. And I think that's very important just in general. We don't spend a lot of time getting to know fellow human beings at the level that Andrew is talking about. And we need to be able to do that. We need to understand them. And when we understand them, we understand their motives better. When we understand them and their motives better, we take less the personal pain that they might bring to us. We are able to empathize with where they're from and what they're going through. And we're able to love them as they are, which is so critical and so crucial. We are so quick to judge nowadays, and judgment is much easier than having a relationship. But judgment prevents us from being intimate with somebody. If I start immediately reacting to something about Andrew, I'm meeting him for the first time. I'm enjoying who you are, Andrew, a lot. And if I start making judgments about you, I will do that because I'm protecting myself, because I'm uncomfortable, or because I don't want to reveal myself, whatever. So it's so important. The lesson that Andrew is activating for all of us here. We don't have to wait till we have a conflict. But if we do have a conflict, trust that a conflict's purpose is to help, it's going to help me get closer, okay, to you. Okay. But we don't have to wait. But when we're meeting somebody for the first time, isn't it our nature to try to pose a little bit? We do that on the internet, right? People pose and they talk about who they are, but they really don't talk about who they are, right? So what if as a society, what if, those of you listening out there, think of an intimate relationship you have now that deserves greater scrutiny, meaning you need a curiosity is a better word. Someone or you're living with that you think but you tend to, if you're living with that person, you tend to focus on and absorb and take in and absorb what it is about them through your lens, through your interpretation, through your personality. Spend some moments with that person, asking the second and third question instead of just assuming something, getting connected at a deeper level.
Right.
I really think that's important. What I was going to say about my especially my dad is I could have spent more time. He lived till he was 81, and I had time to spend with him, but I didn't get to know him as a person, or I got to know my mother a little bit better as a person, but I didn't get to know my dad as a person. And there are reasons why that have to do with my judgments about he was always working and he was a great provider, but I felt like I missed him. He didn't spend a lot of time with me because he's working. I didn't take it personally as he didn't like me, but I just didn't. I should have spent time with him going, how's the work, Dad? What's going on? And you're struggling. So those of you have, you have families, you have partners, you have friends, and you have strangers that you will meet. Get to know them if you decide you want to get closer to them, get to know them by spending time with who they are and less time with who you are, if you will.
So it's always important to get those lessons, Chris, because it's easy to take having family figures like that for granted. Many don't have that opportunity to to really get to talk with them because they wandered off on their own, or they didn't get to stay on this earth with us. Um, but others can fill those roles for us in their absence to maybe not replace them, but still be able to help us along the way. And having that kind of effect on people doesn't extend simply to parental figures. It can be a very close friend of ours that we can rely on and talk to when we need some kind of support, emotional or otherwise. Um, with regards to how how those things can play out in musical groups like Metallica or Rascal Flatts, as you've also worked with them. Um, and another one that I think can apply quite well is, yeah, your website mentions you worked with, I believe his name was Kevin Carter, the football
Hmm.
player.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, obviously, one man of an entire team. Um, so I have to find, or I find myself wondering, how often do you find this kind of a thing coming up with team efforts like that, whether it's a sporting team, a musical group. Um, as your website says, you've also worked with corporate officers who obviously work in a system with other people to get a job done. Um, how often do you find that this, you support role is played with someone else in their life, personal, professional, or otherwise?
Great question. And just so I want to shape the question a little bit more. Like I want to, those of us listening to Andrew right now, the way I'm listening to Andrew right now, I'm understanding how important it is for people to connect as a part of a team or a cohort or a collaboration, or whether it's business, sports, entertainment, wherever it is, family. So you can see the value from him asking the question, the way he asked the question. You can see what's on his mind and in his heart, and I really appreciate that part of you that cares, like I said, about other people. I find that all, it's every situation that I've ever been in my work has involved um, the 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 need for and the want for to have relationships that where we can talk about what's really on our minds or in our hearts, and especially when, like you said, when you need to talk with somebody because you're struggling. And I think one of the joys of working with Metallica, it has been to, well, first of all, I work with by working with them every day for an extensive period of time. It's like I became a part of that family and became a part of what, knowing them at an intimate level and loving them without any question, a deep, deep love and respect for them, and watching them come together. I mean, on the background on my wall above keyboard there is a Metallica poster from I don't know where, Poland maybe.
Hmm.
And look at the end of a concert, there's a picture taken of them and their arms around each other as they're standing facing the audience. That brings chills right now, even for me to say it and see it, because of the fact that they can love each other and they can have that kind of respect for each other, and that to play music together in the concerts of those musical groups that I've worked with, in the concerts is when they, generally speaking, for the most part, find the love for each other through their music. And the problems they have and the conflicts they have as personalities show up more off stage, if you will.
Right.
But we need um, love surrogates, like you said. If a parent, when a parent isn't there for us, or a parent passes away or whatever, or a loved one, we split from that in that relationship. It's a big loss, because having a special relationship with a confidant or with somebody you can be close with is precious. And when you can do that as a band, one of the things we used to institute is before we went out on a show, before we went on a stage, we would sit around and we would have a little, not necessarily a prayer, with Rascal Flatts, we do that because they're very evangelical Christian.
Right.
But we'd have with the circle with the band members, um, Rascal Flatts, the three members, and then the band, supporting band, and also guests or something. We would have a prayer, prayer beforehand, and just to remind us of the gratitude we feel for the experience of being together and being able to play music together. With Metallica, that before we'd be around, we'd hang around, and um, then James or anybody would say something to lead us. It wasn't necessarily a prayer, but it wasn't not a prayer. It depends on how you want to define that. It was a reminder, and then afterwards, to be able to wind down together, and those with corporate. We have my wife and I work with a financial group in the Midwest, and they're very prayerful. And we just had a retreat the other day, and they started with a prayer. And the point I'm making of that is not about religion as much as it is to say, here's why we have a spiritual purpose, if you will, and that's different for me than religion. So having a confidant, the way to have a confidant, whether you're with somebody in a love relationship or in a workplace, is to initiate that. The best way to be a confidant is to become someone who is interested in another person or persons, says, contributes to that and invites them into your heart. I guess I'll stop. I mean, you got me active here, Andrew. I love it. And thank you for that.
I'm glad to have things active. It keeps things interesting. Oh man, I'll be able to keep consistent words and sentences one of these days. But yeah,
you have a large mind and the capacity to take so much in, man. I can see that. And you listen, and when somebody is going on a rant like I am, then it's hard because there's so much that comes in. But you can just pick up the pieces that mean the most to you, and we'll go there next.
Right. I usually go to the idea that I tend to think faster than my mind tends to move faster than my mouth can.
Right. That's what I mean. You have a very fast mind.
Yeah. But it's a lot of what this is basically reminding yourself and others that are there at the moment not to take that moment for granted.
Yes.
Because a lot of that very easily could have been gone. Like I said before, what was going on with Metallica while they were filming the documentary very easily could have turned the other way. And it seems nowadays they're not going to take that for granted either. Obviously, it's things still aren't perfect. I don't think things ever will be, but it sounds like they understand it better, and your ability to work with others across many different fields of life or career, whatever the case could be, the effect is. I guess along the same lines, not exactly the same, because it can always, circumstances are always different, corporate music, whatever it is, but the same line of thought is there. This is what's happening with this moment. We have the chance to experience it. Let's still enjoy it while we can.
See, that to me is profound as well. I mean, look. I think this podcast, which we're doing very spontaneously, which I really appreciate, we're meeting ourselves for the first time. There's purpose behind it, and I can see the purpose shaping up as one. The mission in this moment is to talk about relationships and talk about connecting deeply and having meaningful, not taking anybody for granted. And I'd like to capitalize on what you said there and riff off of that. I mean, I think that everybody that comes into my life, I'm now treating as someone who is here to help me grow while I help them grow. Okay, it's almost like they're spiritual assignments. So I'd like for everybody to, there are a lot. It's easy for us as human beings to, let's say we go to work and we're around a lot of people. We're close to some people. We don't like other people. It's easy for us to blow off the people we say we don't like because they're more uncomfortable for us. One thing to do is the next time you go to work or the next time home or situation, whatever, is to purposefully reach out to somebody you don't know or don't like or think you don't like. Because what Andrew's saying here is we're making assessments about our stars, for example, on the basis of on the surface. We don't know who they are, right? And one of the great things about Metallica, the work with Metallica, was going on site with them, living with them, so to speak. I mean, my wife and I moved out to California to be with Metallica after we started working. I was at the hotel and we would fly in and out. But we started. It was clear as the relationships built B-E-I-L-T, as they built, it was imperative, or it was not imperative. It would optimize the situation if I was with them on site on a day-to-day basis on their terms. That way, I could get to know them in their workplace, if you will.
Right.
Our workplaces are places that we hang out socially. Are the people we hang with are here on Earth with us as companions to our evolution. Never, to quote Andrew, never to be taken for granted, because the likelihood is that when we take them for granted, we miss the opportunity to have something special with them. So I just would like to second what you're saying there and encourage us to maybe reflect, at least from this podcast, and maybe reset some of the relationships that currently exist that we've established in a certain frame of reference that oftentimes protects us or makes us feel comfortable, but doesn't really flush out and flesh out the major reason why they're in our lives, including if there's some tension. The people that cause me tension or co-create tension with me, oftentimes, like we were talking about in the very beginning, like we were talking about mistakes.
Right.
The things that are uncomfortable are the things that can help me grow more than other moments. Not exclusively. I mean, loving moments are to be treasured, but they're much easier. They're much more palatable.
It's a lot of this is, that's kind of the goal I'm trying to get to is, it's still good for us to be comfortable when we can, but simply staying within that comfort zone is not going to contribute to our ability to grow. I've definitely learned my lesson on that one a few times, and I feel like I'm like when I first started doing this, I wasn't exactly incredibly comfortable.
Sure.
Just talking with people who already have some notoriety, because I'm, stuck in that mindset of like, what if I say something that pisses them off and they don't want to deal with me ever again. It's not that I'm looking specifically to get close to anyone that comes onto the show, but I don't want to make it seem like I'm just throwing caution to the wind and all of my own advice and what I'm trying to accomplish with this. I don't want any of this to seem disingenuous, so I'm usually self-conscious about that, but at the same time it's still just as much a learning experience for me as anyone else that could be watching, but I try to make sure the information is available to anyone to be able to find it. It's why whenever I do these streams, I tell the settings on YouTube, keep this on as a video to be viewed afterward, once the stream ends, so that if anybody missed it, they can come back to it and watch it, or if they need to see it again, maybe a year or two down the line, they'll still be able to come back and see it again. As I've done with the Metallica documentary a couple of times. So I feel like I'm getting what I'm trying to accomplish with this show. Talking with anybody, it's like most people that I've talked with so far have been a part of some specific field of entertainment. I've talked with a few different voice actors. I have talked with people who are fan community leaders, people who operate a chat room, server, or people who help to moderate some of these places online. I've also talked with artists before on the other show. I'm talking with sound engineers to see what it's like on that end of, making some piece of entertainment. But that's all experience is specific to those fields. Um, but when I decided I wanted to talk with you about some of these things in regards to entertainment, which I do feel sports falls under that category
Sure,
as well.
for sure.
Yeah. I felt like you had a lot of experience, especially after I saw the website and saw how many different people you've worked with. Um, that your input on a lot of this is very, um, I guess, broad because it can apply to so many things as you have worked with so many people in those different fields. Um, so one thing I want to try to find out from you is, um, how difficult is it for you um, to work with so many different places? Because you said you've been what was it, a psychotherapist for 30 years?
Yeah.
Um, how different does performance coaching or performance enhancement coaching feel from psychotherapy, and what are some of the challenges you find when it comes to doing your particular line of work?
Yeah, I think
Oh boy.
uh,
Okay.
helping them fulfill their highest potential, right?
Oh,
So,
oh,
but across the board, go ahead. I'm sorry.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I guess my internet decided to cut out for a second just as you were starting your thoughts.
So what was that?
Just as oh, oh, okay, yeah, just as you were starting your thoughts, the your video cut off and you didn't come through for like a good 6, 8 seconds, something like that.
Okay, so you want me to say it again then?
Yeah,
Okay,
start your
so
thoughts from the beginning
what I
again.
remember was what I was reacting to initially was that you the that when I think mentioned earlier that I had that epiphany while I was out running and the epiphany to describe the difference between psychotherapy and performance coaching. Performance coaching being helping people fulfill their dreams. That I think the saying that came from out of nowhere was the voice that came out of nowhere was you used to work with people's nightmares, now you're working with their dreams.
Right.
It's profound to me. And psychotherapy tends to be with people's nightmares, and performance coaching tends to be with the dreams. And dreams is the upside fulfillment of every person on the planet wanting to achieve their highest of whatever their vision is, right? Or their wish list is. So that I would answer that question. The commonality across the board. For example, you mentioned Kevin Carter, who I just picked a football player that I work with, is a good friend of mine, to be on the website, right, and testify, right. But I worked with football players for two teams, the Rams when they won the Super Bowl, and the Kansas City Chiefs for about 5 years after that as well. And the people will talk back. What people remind me of is the thing they remember most is not the touchdown they scored, or not the play that they made, or even the win of the team, as much as they remember the locker room. They remember the friendships of the locker room. That's what I mean by that. I mean, people talk, when they get together after being away from football, just can you imagine what they had to go through to become the ever evolving, ever higher level performers in the sport? The punishment of the daily, the work in their bodies, focusing on, the ups and downs of everything, pressures. So the people that are elite performers in our world have to sacrifice, like you implied before. They have to sacrifice a lot of themselves. Olympic athletes, which I've worked with. I mean, you have to sacrifice a piece of your life for a cause that brings people together. And so you remember the relationships. When you were talking about D&D and how you're working on some of the issues with people, the connections when you go through something with somebody, they're everlasting.
Right.
So across the corporate world, the fact that people remember the boardroom, or that they remember the early days of founders of a startup, in the dorm room at a school or something like that, trying to figure something out, and the relationships are the cornerstone of everything we do in our society. And you and I are talking about this and sharing our ideas about it. And so across the board, it was easy for me to take that piece with me wherever I went. What got hard was, I didn't play football. I played intramural in college or something. I was, I could actually play a little bit flag football, but what else, right? Spectator, yeah, good spectator. Business, I guess I have my own business, right? But I'm not in the corporate business world, so I don't know. And music, I never played in a band. I have a musical background a little bit. So, but that was scary. It was and it's very important to point out, whatever you guys, those of you who are listening, whatever you all are thinking about right now, as you think about your own application of this podcast to you, it's important to hear what I think. This is another thing that was activated live in person by Andrew. Andrew referred my memory to the fact that the best things I've done in my life have come from from engaging discomfort. Okay, it's not the comfort zone that we need to be in. Greatness does not get achieved inside the comfort zone. Greatness gets achieved inside of the discomfort that we go through, which again, if you tie it with conflict, is part of that, right? So what an actress that I admired, I don't know her, but about 40 years ago wrote in a Sunday supplement, "I choose my roles by how they scare me." I'll never forget that. What do you think of that, Andrew? Isn't that cool? I choose my roles by that which scares me. So you got into podcasting, you got into a lot of things that you're getting into because you were uncomfortable with where you were and comfortable, you didn't know it necessarily at the time, but you decided that you wanted it to pioneer.
Right.
And anything we pioneer, anything that's new for us, involves our fear. What a great lesson. Move into the fear. Engage the fear. Embrace the fear. Convert the fear, right?
Right.
So I can remember how scared shitless I was in my first meeting with Metallica. And Metallica told me they didn't want to, Jason came in and said, I don't want to talk to my mates right now. I don't want you in the room. And I going, oh shit, what do I do now? Because I didn't know, the management team, which had worked with me with Rage Against the Machine, the management team wanted me in because Metallica was having some struggle, but I had to prove myself to the guys, right?
Right.
And Jason, the first thing, Jason was coming in to break up with the band, which he did. But after I came back into the meeting after a certain point, because I realized I left, listened, because I was on the other side of this partition in this hotel room. And I came back in and Lars said, let him stay. And we started our work. But I was scared. I was scared talking to a bunch of coaches in 1997 with the Rams for the first time, a bunch of people that I didn't know, and trying to work with them. And the same thing with anything I do now. I have greater confidence in myself because of some of the things I've gone through, including a lot of pain, but I still, I respect the discomfort I feel.
Right. You've definitely walked into a lot of situations not knowing a whole lot. You've probably, I'm sure, like in the Metallica example, you've had some like basic knowledge of what you were getting into. Like they're a heavy metal band, they're having some kind of internal struggle. We need you to help them out with it. I'm assuming that's what you got.
I'm interrupting. It's no different than a couple walking into my office when I was doing marriage counseling. In that sense,
right.
Just more dimensions and a lot a lot. There are a lot of side effects to it. There's so much more. Being a famous group, famous people have a whole set of challenges that we'll never understand because we just want autographs or want to admire them, and we'll never understand how what like you were talking about before. We don't know what's going on in their personal lives.
Right.
Tremendous upheaval and trying to be famous is not. It's very very difficult. Nobody teaches us how to deal with conflict. Nobody teaches us how to be famous, right? Until
Right.
you're there. So
I was actually just reading because I'm trying to do a little bit of research on Freddie Mercury because I I'm kind of doing this thing. We're still trying to figure out how often we're going to do this, but one of the guys in the other podcast group that I'm with, we decided to do this thing on the life and death of Gianni Versace, the fashion designer. And
hmm
in learning about him, there was definitely a lot to pick out on what was going on with that. Learning about his killer, um, and it was interesting to talk about that. And now we decided we wanted to talk about Freddie Mercury next.
Yep.
And I picked up this book from my library in this area, and in it kind of starts with the author's personal experiences with Freddie, and being around him as like I think she was a reporter at the time, and then the next chapter is about the Live Aid concert, that one of the biggest, most well-known performances of Queen, and that little chapter starts with a couple of people who've worked with bands, um, I guess as management. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they said that they basically said being famous is an absolutely terrifying experience. Um, but Freddie was able to make it work because he had the type of like I guess mindset, but he also had the type of personality that worked so well with being famous. He knew how to put on a show because essentially that's more or less what he was born to do. He knew how to put on a show. He was an absolute amazing. He was an absolutely amazing showman. Um, but with many other groups, you know, I don't know how much of it is something that becomes a big challenge to them in regards to like, uh, I guess the fame getting in the way of things that they like to do, or how stressful it could be. Um, Whatever the challenges that fame brings, not knowing about it myself, um, a lot of it can be very difficult to deal with, and I start to wonder how much of that how much effect you see fame having in regards to the people you work with, especially in the entertainment business.
Well, it. You're right, and it really you have to start with each individual is different, right, and
Right.
can handle it differently. And I never met Freddie Mercury. What a great showman, great entertainer. Obviously, behind the scenes, he struggled with his personal life, right, and not unlike probably many people who are gay, period, who don't come out of the closet or don't, more and more our society is receptive, right? But that was an issue, and whatever else he did to himself, abusing himself, um, that that, and I don't remember whether he did drugs. I'm sure he did drugs or something. But the fame thing is a drug. It's a drug. I mean, when you're sitting there, I mean, I'm looking out over the stage and like in Europe when we were traveling with Metallica, and looking out over 80,000 people in a stadium, just adoring you on stage, them, on
Right.
stage, and how and the intoxication of that relationship. It's a worship. It's like an evangelical experience. It's like one of the evangelical preachers on a Sunday in front of a church. It's like so empowering, but it's so seductive because you're doing they're worshiping what it is you give to them in that moment, and they adore you for what you're giving them in that moment. But it's you have to live a life also. And one of the guys that I worked with in one of the bands said, "Hey, I'm suffering from PTSD." What are you talking about?
Hmm.
He said, when I come home, I have to empty the trash. And I said, well, you don't have to empty the trash, but anyway, but I understood what he meant. He meant that on the road, I'm adored, and when I come home, I'm just me, and I have to deal with my everyday stuff. So fame, I have written about it, and I really feel like, look, fame is a shared experience where we, as our fans of our heroes, have a greater responsibility to their well-being. We'll never get to know them the way they need to be known. But if we adore them, we throw them out for the next, we replace them with the next band, or the next, movie star, or the next, team or sport or whatever. And it's tragic. I mean, and we chew them up and spit them out. We don't have respect for our role as a spectator. And, it's not nowadays, it's even more difficult because there is more exchange. You get to know them a little bit more, and you also get to tell them they're piece of shit on stage, or they don't like. We went to a show. I mean, I remember situations working with movie people when they're walking down the street and someone would come up to them, or in a restaurant for an autograph, and they're with their family. They don't friggin' want to be interrupted. But we don't have any respect for boundaries, and we see them through our lens, and they become inspirations to us. But the purpose of a hero is not for us to attach in a dependent way. It's to become inspired to be the hero in us, right? That's the real reason.
Right.
So you could tell I'm really passionate about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really difficult set of circumstances. So those of us out there who are wanting to be famous, and those of us out there who are recognize that we have attachment to our heroes, I think what Andrew and I are both saying, be a little bit more respectful of the fact that you don't know them as people, and you probably aren't going to know them as people. You can admire them, but understand, don't depreciate them, and don't judge them, or like, I don't like this song. This is I don't like this movie. It was lousy in this movie. I mean, come on.
Right.
Anyway. I don't know about you, but I got to wind up here pretty soon. I'm probably doing way more than you intended, so I apologize.
No, it's all right. I've getting discussion because I usually try to get to 2 hours. I usually try to get at least.
Oh, you
an
get
hour
to
and a
2
half.
hours? Oh,
Is that?
okay. Well, we go.
Yeah, I
Let's go for it.
usually try to go for at least an hour and a half. Although I have had 1 or 2
No,
others.
that's fine. Go ahead for another 10. I also don't want to just be.
Well, as long as I'm not getting in the way of anything you had planned today, so
Okay, thanks.
I'm very flexible on that. But yeah, in regards to having heroes, I remember listening to Metallica's S&M concert when they played with the San Francisco Symphony, and one of the songs that really stood out to me was a song called "Hero of the Day." And in looking at the background of that song, I recall seeing that James wrote that as a song about our children finding heroes in people other than our more immediate role models like family and parents. And they're basically starting to accept, movie stars or, big name musicians or whoever as our, actual role models that we learn from rather than the people around us. Do you think that ever ends up coming? Have you ever seen that come up in any of the people you've worked with?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, there's surrogate role model. I mean, I think it's fine for us. I remember growing up with baseball cards and football cards and stuff like that, and admiring people that way, and admiring musicians instead of singers, especially. And I think we admire teachers, and we admire different people throughout our lives. And I think it's great. Again, as I see it, those surrogate replacements, are surrogate replacements sometimes when we don't have let's say we don't have a father around, or We don't have someone that should occupy that role normally, let's say. But those surrogates, again, if they reflect things about us that we can grow, if they inspire me to be a better man or to be better at what I do, I think that's great. If they become substitutes to the point where we worship them at our expense and their expense, then I think it's a problem. And I don't know that that's answering the question, because I think yes, of course, it comes up all the time. And for the people I've worked with, it's hard for them sometimes to feel like Jason Newsted, I never got to know him really well, but he was exceptionally good at at taking time after the concerts to sign, to pay attention to fans. And I think it's really important for fan meet and greets, and for people to have a sense of connection at a deeper level with their heroes.
Right. I haven't really seen much of Jason since he left the band. I've heard it come up. He went off to do his own projects, but I remember he said that it was one of the better choices he made to leave the band when he did. So if that worked out more to his favor, then it's good, because I'm sure he enjoyed a lot of the time that he had with the band, especially playing the music that he loved with them. But sometimes it's good to go your own separate way to do something that does work better for you. It could work better for them, depending on the circumstances.
Sure. Depending on how you incorporate the pain of that and convert it into something great. It's like we talked about before.
Right.
And Jason, while we're talking about him, I mentioned this. I want to re-mention it. He was the reason. He was the catalyst for the work that was done subsequently. He deserves a lot of credit for the fact that he started the first session by confronting the band in a way that they needed to be confronted.
As I often describe, the swift kick in the ass, basically.
Yeah, and I can remember how, really devastating it was to everybody in the band at that time. The other guys, and it was something that they needed to process, and eventually they were able to work. It took 2 years to work with him. Bob Rock was the bass player on the album, mm-hmm. And then and it was the fourth member of the group, if you will, for a while, as well as the producer of the album, Some Kind of Monster. And then Rob was hired probably 3 years into it, 2.5, 3 years into it. Yep. Of course, James was away quite a bit of time for rehab and stuff. So, James, James and others do speak to how important Jason was, not just in terms of his role in the band when he was with the band, but how he left the band was really crucial. Because it forced people to take a look at themselves.
Because you want to know when I would hope a lot of people want to know when they're doing something wrong, because at least in my experience, making a mistake is already bad enough. If I repeat the mistake, that somehow tends to feel worse. One would think that, I made this mistake before, I'm used to it by now. But I guess it's part of human nature to really intensely dislike repeating the same thing, and it's still turning out just as bad as it did before, or just it being annoying coming up more than once. So with this, it's the band definitely acknowledged that a problem came up because of all the different circumstances around it, and they made the effort to improve on it, and you definitely were there to help them out with a lot of it, which now I think people still nowadays call you the man who saved Metallica, but when I decided to reach out to you, I saw the website and saw you would work with so many other people, and I start to wonder, um, how often a situation comes up where people feel they need to reach out to you to help them out with things like that, because I'm sure all the people that are listed on your website are just like a sampling of the various people you've worked with, whether they're especially high profile or not. Um, so I start to wonder if it's if a lot of the times you're called into work with anyone, how often is it that it's a critical situation, like on the level of when you were called into work with Metallica?
First of all, I never saved Metallica. That's just a media, way to put it.
Right.
They saved themselves, and I'm not being overly modest about it. They saved themselves. I helped them do that. My role is always to help people help themselves, and not to be the one that saves anything. I'm called in differently. I've been called in to do things differently at different times, right?
Right.
And that was an event, a special thing in my life, because it was, as I referenced before, I'll say it this way: I learned how important it was to leave the office and go out to where people are. Now, I still, Zooming, everything is done by Zoom nowadays, right?
Yeah.
And when I went to, by being with them, which was a remarkably unique experience, it was much more challenging than the safety, being in the safety of a 45-minute session or a 2-hour session that could be held on my terms. And so that stands out as one of the many gifts that Metallica gave me. And to your question, people now, the way I see it is, when someone reaches out, I do my best when someone reaches out, anybody reaches out, to connect with them at LinkedIn or through the website, or direct contact or whatever, direct referral, to at least have a moment with them to see whether I can help them. Okay, because I kind of have the same spirit as you do, and I should really appreciate that about you. I mean, if I look at, I don't have a filter that says, okay, this person is better than this person, and this person deserves me more than this person. What I do filter out is, do I think I can help somebody? And there's sometimes I can't, or in my mind I can't. One of the things that is really, really difficult for anybody in my field to help somebody, in a situation to help them in, is when somebody's still relieving themselves through addiction, because to grow, you have to be able to face yourself. And to face yourself, you have to acknowledge you have a problem. And if you are numbing yourself, that works against owning a problem, right? Or owning a challenge. If you want to get better, or if you have a crisis, you have to be in a place where you're receptive. And I can't, so I can't help somebody in that, because I'm taking their money or whatever while they're becoming, relieving themselves. And then they're not going to go anywhere. The relief of a problem, like we were talking about before, if you relieve a problem, then you don't have there's no impetus. It's like a conflict. If you're looking to blame somebody else, you offload on somebody else, you're not ready to change.
Right. So it's kind of like basically opening the valve to release the pressure without fixing what's causing the pressure buildup.
Why couldn't I say it that well? Why couldn't I just be direct and say it that well?
It came to my mind because I'm into fixing. I'm into fixing cars. I'm very much like an engineering, fan, basically. And for me, I I don't know why I try to compare it to other things so much, but it was for me that was like one of the first things that came to my mind is like it just sounds like a a pressure washer with an issue. Uh, you know,
That's
yeah.
good. I like that.
Um, so it's uh, it sounds like you understand that helping people sometimes is acknowledging that sometimes there's just times where you can't always help someone.
Yeah, sometimes that's helping.
Yeah.
Sometimes that helpful. But making touching base with them, I give them the respect they deserve for reaching out, which I think is really important. That to me is the righteous thing to do. You know?
Right. Because at least you made an effort to reach out and ask somebody for help, uh, and even if they can't help you out immediately, you still start to. It's still like a sign. Okay, maybe this is a lot bigger than than I immediately thought it was, and that just the thought alone that oh I can't handle this part at this point. Maybe there is something else I'm not considering, and they start to uh, they start to think about okay, what else can I do now?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because
So
you take the impetus of what the fact that they want help, but you also know that speaking of like addictions and stuff, it's public knowledge that I think Dave Mustaine went into rehab like 10 or 15 times, right?
right.
And what happens is, and he's done really well with himself. But it takes sometimes more than one time when you're talking about mistakes. How many times have I made the same mistake over and over and over again until I finally get it?
Mhm.
And so a mistake sometimes just initially is a tap on the shoulder, and then it becomes like a slap in the face, right?
Right.
And you finally, oh, I got to do something. Yeah.
Uh, Dave Mustaine is definitely an interesting figure. When I saw him coming onto the documentary, he was opening up to Lars,
Yes.
especially about what had happened. I think it was back in the mid late 70s that it or no, I think it was actually early 70s that he was kicked out of the band. And I remember when I had first heard about this happening, with Dave, I was just like, he was too much even for Metallica at the time. Who later ended up they for context
Seems
they
pretty hypocritical, doesn't
yeah
it?
for context that they later ended up getting the name Alcoholica because of how much
Right,
beer they
right.
were drinking on a regular basis. But then I decided to look into Dave's story later on, and it sounded like he formed the band Megadeth purely out of spite just to get back at Metallica, and that a lot of it seemed to backfire. But then I start to think about when he was in that room talking with Lars, about what had happened. Um, it's for someone who I had thought was like, how is this guy too much for them? Um, in that moment, I had seen humility in somebody, especially from
Isn't that
somebody who had
beautiful?
such direct involvement with such a huge name. Um, and it's, again, it goes back to having those really human moments in that
Yes.
we have those moments where we learn, we had made mistakes and we don't want it to, come back and be a bigger issue for us later. Um, and, now any issues he has is, of an entirely different nature, but, um, in that moment he understood, and was sharing, hey, this definitely was an issue, but, um, I don't want it to continue to be a problem for us. Um, do you?
And Lars was learned something from that experience too,
Yeah.
and that Dave confronted him. It's sort of like each of those situations. Getting back to the beginning, of what we talked about, each of those situations that can be conflicted, are opportunities
Right.
for everybody.
How often do you find a situation like that where it seemed like the final like results of a conflict being resolved? How often do you see that happening in your line of work?
The a resolution like that in that moment you're talking about.
A resolution, yeah, kind of a resolution like that. Maybe not quite the same, but sort of like feels on the same level?
Well, quite often, like when I was doing psychotherapy, when you're working with a couple and someone, breaks down and says, I'm sorry, and then you have that kind of when there's an emotional reaction inside, like there was in that moment
Right.
in the film, and there's an emotional reaction, that there's something that's taking place that's going to now be used to reconstruct a relationship.
Right.
When there's emotion less, there's generally, if it stays in the head, it's usually a sign that they still haven't gotten there yet. But it happens. Yes, it happens in life all the time. When you have, like when you're resolving something with one of your buddies, when there's emotion, when someone was feeling something, when you were feeling something, when he was feeling something, or she was feeling something, whatever, you can tell that there's progress being made. You
Right.
know.
Uh, so yeah, that definitely touches on a lot of what I wanted to get across with this, and I even have somebody in the chat for this live stream. Get somebody by the name of Patrick Bojko says, "Thank you so much. This will help me out so much." So I definitely feel
Oh,
like
that's great.
definitely
Oh,
feel
that's
like we accomplished
great.
that.
Oh,
Uh,
that's great, Andrew. Congratulations. Yeah.
I guess the last question I'll have for you before we wrap this up is there like any like advice or feedback that you would give for people to consider, um, whether they're trying to get into entertainment or if it's just life themselves? Is there anything you feel should be shared, you know, that in regards to anything specific or anything general?
I think, I really respect dreams. I respect the fact that people have a mission on this planet. Sometimes our dreams are born out of the ashes of pain and suffering and trying to overcompensate for something they didn't have when they were younger, or something missing in the early stages of their childhood. And you can follow everybody's course in our humanity, the ones that we know about and read about. For the most part, all overcome something. So when we're facing a challenge, when we're honoring our dream, we pursue it, right? And we don't let the pain of something get in the way. At the same time, there has to be a reconciliation at some point when we're successful at fulfilling our dream or not. There has to be a reconciliation with why we are pushing so hard to do what we want to do, and whether or not that dream is a dream that's been spawned naturally or is one that's totally compensatory. If it's totally compensatory, maybe we're being guided spiritually to maybe not achieving our dream is in the way we're doing it now needs to be re-examined. Maybe we should be pivoting slightly to the left of where we think our dream is going. Generally speaking, look at the dots that are connectable in your lives. I'm talking to everybody now. Look at how what's happened as you're evolving and why you're pursuing what you're pursuing, and pay attention to the non-coincidental flow of your life, and ask yourself, am I on course? And what am I doing or not doing to prevent myself from fulfilling what I said I wanted to fulfill? Attach not to the outcome, but attach to the process, which isn't attaching to anything. Just go with the process. For example, and to look at all that you've gone through to get to where you are now, and you're in the beginning stages of your own evolution. So, yeah, I mean, I just want to say thank you so much for having me here and giving me an opportunity to share and get to know you and your audience. I wish I could get to know them better. If they do write or something and people want to commit, if you want to send me over a bunch of things that people have said, if you collect them and if like that's fine, that's great. But the big thing is that in this moment we've had a very special moment, and I really appreciate you and the quality of who you are as a person, and the consequent questions and discussion that we've had, which I think has been very stimulating.
Oh yeah, I'm very thankful that you took the time out of your day to have this discussion with me, because I felt this was very important to have. I've been seeing conflict coming up left and right, especially in the artist community as of late. So I'm hoping that this can be something that people can really look onto and find helpful for them. And at the same time, it's I hope it helps people understand some of the parts of being on the more high profile side, as well as just understanding how some of these problems relate to our own lives as well. So I definitely appreciate you being here and being willing and able to have this discussion.
Thank you so much again, and the very best to you, and hope that we get a chance to chat again and send me over what you got when it's done. And I look forward to that.
Will do. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yep. So for everybody else, this discussion will be available on YouTube for you to be able to come back to and watch later. I'm also working towards putting everything on Odyssey for anybody looking for an alternative to YouTube. Gab Hominem will still be around as the hashtag Gab Hominem, but I'm also working on getting that actual page for itself set up. But otherwise, huge thanks to Phil for joining us in this discussion. I always felt he was somebody that was very much worth talking to, especially on this type of subject. So, do you have a website that you would like people to check out if they decide they want to talk with you or find your services?
I'm not promoting that, but you can check me out, and I think it's philetowle.com.
Right. All right.
Anyway, thanks, Andrew. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Fellow human being. Okay. See ya.
Take care.
Bye. Thanks. Bye.
All right. But yeah, that was it. And I want to thank you guys all for tuning in or bringing up the video to listen to. Hope you got as much out of it as I did. So thank you all for taking the time to listen to this, and I will see you guys next week when I go for take two of, or no, not take two of my in my discussion with Kennedy Phillips and Chris Moore, who are both sound designers for Hasbin Hotel, among other things. Hopefully, if anybody's looking to get into sound work, or even doing voice acting, or trying to start an audio podcast, audio drama, there's going to be a lot for you to learn from that as well. So stay tuned, keep an eye on that hashtag, and I'll see